Hey YouTube, JoeBoy here. So, chapter 902 of One Piece is out, so if you haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so, because I will be spoiling you, but now that you have, let's begin. So yeah guys, Whole Cake Island has finally reached its conclusion. And if we can trust the editor's note on the cover of Shonen Jump this week, then the reverie is going to begin next. And so, as makes sense for what is the most contentious arc in the history of One Piece. I say contentious, there's been arcs in One Piece and scenes in One Piece that some people haven't liked. But I don't think that there's ever been an entire arc that has opinions as divided as this, with people absolutely loving it and absolutely despising it. But in this case, the end is no exception. The consensus, as I can tell by people on Twitter as well as Ora Jackson, is that this final chapter is excellent. But there is no consensus for how good the end of this arc is in totality, because as per usual, people are on very far extremes typically. And so I could probably talk about this for a very long time, but honestly, now that Whole Cake Island is over, I may make another video talking about how my feelings about the arc, maybe analysis on it. But the time for debating over Whole Cake Island, I think, is almost beyond us. We're past it now. That being said, I think that it didn't really matter what the end of Whole Cake Island was for a lot of people reading it, because they had already decided that they did not care. There's this portion after the castle fell from chapter, I would say around 875, 874 till about 892, in which One Piece just was not very good for a lot of people. And I think that it's a bit unfortunate that a lot of people took it such that they can't really enjoy what I think has been a fantastic end to the arc. But people are still asking what is the point of the last 30 chapters of this arc, and I would say that it hasn't been perfect at various points in times. It has felt a little bit drawn out. But if you look at everything that Oda accomplished from the end when the castle fell till now, one thing sticks out above anything else. Time and time again, everybody that the Straw Hats were friends with died. Or even if it's the end of this arc, we presume that they are going to die. That is the price paid for trespassing upon a Yonko's territory. Oda made that very clear. But to sort of sidetrack this conversation for just a moment, I really want to talk about what occurred between Sanji and Pudding in this last chapter, because I think that there are many ways to interpret it and maybe some subliminal messaging lying under the surface. But before we get into it, I just want to say that I absolutely loved it. I think that the Pudding and Sanji moments throughout the end of this arc were maybe my favorite continuous story. And the feels hit me hard reading the end of this chapter. But I think the question that we should ask is, why did Pudding remove the memory of the kiss from Sanji's mind? And I think that the answer probably is pretty simple. Sanji and Pudding is forbidden love. Love that can never be, because they are on either side of the border. On either side of the battlefield. Pudding loves Sanji. She loves him enough to want to save him from the pain of loving her back. I think that Oda has teased a connection of Pudding and Sanji and Romeo and Juliet throughout Whole Cake Island. And as Oda often does when he is inspired by classical stories or stories of any kind, he adds his little twist onto them. And Romeo and Juliet, they were on either sides of rival families. And ultimately their love led to the death of both of them. In Oda's story, Juliet decided to save both herself and Romeo. But even deeper than this, guys, don't you think that it's very poignant, very interesting, that at the end of the day, Sanji's greatest feat from this arc, which is earning the love of a woman, which he has been trying to do for his entire life, and is central to his character, he finally earned a woman's love. He finally got a legitimate kiss. And that kiss was stripped from his memory. Sanji does not even remember his greatest victory of this arc. It's almost as if everything resets to zero. That all of the development, everything that occurred amounted to nothing. And in Sanji's mind, that is the case. And I think that the same can be said of most everything that occurred in Whole Cake Island. Of everything that occurred at the end of the day, it all amounted to basically nothing. An entire 80-chapter pointless arc, some would say. They came to rescue Sanji, they leave Jinbei behind. They want to save the Vinsmoke, and yet the Vinsmoke at the end still die. Sanji left in the first place to guarantee Zeph's safety, but ultimately decided to leave Zeph's fate up to chance. They came to increase their forces, their manpower for the fight against Kaido, and they left behind very valuable manpower. Sanji was tasked with making a cake which was supposed to protect his friends, and as of now, it doesn't seem to have had really any effect whatsoever. Really, I think that the only thing that the Strats really gained in this entire arc were information about the Void Century and the Poneglyphs. That's it. But with all these striking comparisons of what they came to achieve and what they ended up not achieving, it almost begs the question, maybe the entire point of Whole Cake Island was that it was pointless. Like it or not, Oda's objective for leaving this arc was for them to return to Wano mostly empty-handed. The 80 chapter equivalent of Impel Down or Sabaody or Marineford. An arc of failure. And if you guys do not enjoy failure, then I would not hold that against you because neither do I. But failure in One Piece is often used as a catalyst for growth. And I fully expect Oda to make Luffy and the crew and Sanji grow from this experience, as he has done somewhat already. And so I've been wanting to talk about this since last week, and we'll probably push it again off into next week. But I think that one person that needs to grow, or has grown, or is growing right now more than anybody else is Sanji. In this last chapter, he learned that Pedro died. And you can see him think to himself, your resting place wasn't supposed to be here, was it? And then he said out loud, this happened because he came to rescue me. If you add on the fact that Sanji is not aware of what is occurring with Zeph, and is perhaps contemplating the possibilities of what might occur to him, I think that a lot of things might be weighing on Sanji's mind. I suppose at this point that Sanji has realized that the entire point of coming to Whole Cake Island, his decision to come to Whole Cake Island was not a good one, because as stated earlier, it was pointless. He accomplished nothing. The only things that were achieved were negative, with the exception of the Road Poneglyph and obviously saving him, which wouldn't have been necessary if he had never left. You guys know that I will be looking forward to the moment in which Sanji and the rest of the crew and Luffy end up arriving in Wano and meeting with Zoro and the other half of the crew, and seeing Zoro's reaction to Sanji's return, seeing what Zoro actually has to say, because if you guys remember from Zoro never wanted Luffy to leave in the first place. He had already realized that there was no fruit to be had from this tree. And as Sanji might be thinking to himself that he is to blame for everything that has occurred, especially Jinbei, if they learned that Jinbei had died, I think Zoro would be of a similar mind. Even if they don't know that Jinbei had died, the fact that they left his fate ambiguous, that's on Sanji. You know, I kind of imagine this situation in my mind, Zoro asking Sanji, well, did you go out? Did you accomplish what it is that you wanted to? And I think Sanji would have to say no. And I think that would only make Zoro more angry. But yeah, the scene of Carrot going to reassure Sanji by petting him, and then really just upsetting herself. My god, guys, like real tears from that scene. I really enjoyed that. Speaking about Jinbei and all of the other people that are presumed to die, Jinbei's crew, the Vinsmoke, Peckham's, you know, I'll say the same thing that I said at the end of my review for the last chapter. I think that they're all going to die, and I think that they are all going to come back to life. Now, there's many ways in which this is possible to occur, so there's many ways in which Oda can write it into existence. But the way that I like most is something that Oda has previously set up. If Big Mom takes the lifespan of somebody, she can, or the lifespan can be returned. We saw this because of Moscato. Moscato had his lifespan stolen, yet we saw him in recent chapters alive again. Now, a lot of people are saying that Big Mom cannot steal Jinbei's lifespan, and there's always the possibility that he chooses death rather than life. But if we are assuming that he is choosing life and not to just straight up be killed, then I do think that it is possible for Big Mom to steal his life if Jinbei is less worried about his own life and more worried about his crew's life. I don't think that Jinbei really cares about himself. I don't think that he fears Big Mom for himself, but he might fear Big Mom for others. And I think that this would line up perfectly with what Luffy said in the last chapter. Even if you die, don't die. Even if you die, come back to life. That's a way that I can interpret that. And I think that another thing that this chapter really solidifies for me in my mind is we are expecting that Jinbei is going to make an appearance in Wano, right? That was the promise that he made with Luffy. And I think that it would really defeat the point of Luffy's trust in Jinbei if Jinbei does not return to Wano. But how exactly does Jinbei get from where he is in his current situation to Wano? And the only way that makes sense to me is if he is taken there by Big Mom. Potentially taken there dead. And if his lifespan is taken, there would obviously have to be a Jinbei homie. So for me, guys, this really solidifies my belief that Big Mom will follow the Straw Hats to Wano. And then she will, in a way, fulfill Jinbei's promise. As for the Vinsmokes, I don't think that their role in the story is complete, and I feel very much unsatisfied with their role in Whole Cake Island if it is complete. But yeah, my belief is just the same as with Jinbei and Pedro and pretty much everyone else that died. There's going to be some huge climactic moment in part 2 of the Big Mom arc in which everybody who has died returns to life. That's what I've been saying for the past several months, and I still believe that is the way out. But I think in all of this chapter, the thing that I enjoyed, and it's really difficult to say this, the thing that I really enjoyed more than anything was the backstory and the explanation of the relationship between Brule and Katakuri. If you guys remember a few chapters back, we rationalized based on what was said between Katakuri and Flompy. It was that Katakuri's favorite sister was not Flompy, even though every other brother's was. So it was a question then of who was Katakuri's favorite sister. And we learned the answer to that question in this chapter. Katakuri's favorite sister has always been Brule. And boy, that's a shocker. I honestly do not know how I want to discuss this. Like, it's so different to our perception of Brule. Brule who wanted to slice up Nami's face. Brule who constantly throughout this arc was an annoyance. At the end, she showed her sweet side. And it was fucking fantastic. Guys, I want you to get your fingers ready. I want you to point your mouse at the dislike button and prepare yourself to click. Because I need to say this. Your perception of Brule has changed in just one tiny little moment. This is fully what I expect to happen with Big Mom in the future of the story. And something that has repeatedly happened with members of the Big Mom Pirates. Because what matters in One Piece is the relationship between two characters. You take the relationship between Brule and the Straw Hats, and you have animosity, you have conflict, you get the very worst of Brule. But you take the relationship of Brule and Katakuri, and you see a completely different side of her. The same is true of Luffy, the dynamic between his crew, and the dynamic that he currently shares with Big Mom. I'm not saying that Brule is a good person, but I am saying that we have misjudged her, as is plainly obvious reading this chapter. And I think that it's been basically spelled out to us in this last chapter. What was initially the relationship between Katakuri and Luffy changed as Katakuri got to know Luffy as they fought, to the point to where Katakuri was, by the end, their friend. Katakuri helped Luffy escape. He didn't make it easy on him, but it's undeniable. By the end, Katakuri was rooting for Luffy. He is happy that Luffy was able to escape. I'm certain I can't be crazy. I'm certain everybody out there sees it, that the Big Mom Pirates will not be enemies of the Straw Hats forever. At some point in time, their relationship will be resolved. If you can't see it with Big Mom, I know a lot of people can't see it with Big Mom, but at the very least, you can see it with Katakuri, clearly. Doesn't Katakuri look like Straw Hat Grand Fleet material to you? Doesn't it feel as though he is no longer an enemy? I think you gotta ask yourself, how do the Straw Hats end up fighting the Big Mom Pirates while their #1 strongest fighter is their ally? It's a question for the ages. Long story short here, guys, is I still think that the Big Mom Pirates' role in the future of the story is as ambiguous as when we started Whole Cake Island, regardless of what has occurred here and regardless of what might occur in the future. I remain as interested, no, that's not right. I am more interested now than ever in the Big Mom Pirates, to be honest with you guys. This dynamic between Katakuri and Brule just fascinates me. And I honestly think that it helps us understand the entire family just a little bit more. But yeah guys, aside from this, everything seems to be what it is that we expected over the last chapter or so. Lots of things are left unresolved in Whole Cake Island, and I fully expect most of these things that you wanted, or most of these things that you thought would happen, are going to happen still, but in Big Mom Arc Part 2. But yeah guys, that's pretty much all I had to say today. Extra excited that the Reverie is likely to be up next, and no break next week. Curious as to what you guys thought about this chapter, whether you agree with anything that I had to say, disagree, just share your thoughts. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.